My name is Willy Bolander. I study influence, persuasion, and leadership in selling and sales management, and I teach people how to sell. In this podcast, we'll talk to some of the world's top sales leaders and see what we can learn from them. Welcome to the Sales Lab. Well, we are here with Justin Berger, who is from Spraying Systems Company, and I met with one of Justin's team members a few weeks ago, and then met Justin maybe a week or so ago, and found their company and their context very interesting from like an example, a rich example of what we mean when we say technical sales. And so, Justin, maybe can you start by giving us a little bit of background on yourself? Where'd you come from? How'd you get to where you are now?
Yeah, thanks so much, Willie. Very happy to be here and love any interaction and work with A&M. And really started my undergrad here at Texas A&M a few years ago, and slowly transitioned into the wastewater treatment business. And then from there, in that time, I started working on my MBA and all those other fun things, higher education, and had some unique experiences on the education side as well, which inevitably led me to Spraying Systems Company. And I've been there for, I think, going on now 8 years or so. And, at first, whenever I was interviewing for the job and talking about that, I was like, what kind of world could there be in sprays? A little nozzle right here. How complex could it really be? You go out to your pressure washer, the pest guy is out there spraying bugs. And when I got to the lab, I was very, very humbled to understand how deep sprays are involved in our everyday lives. We just have no clue. We're in nearly every market vertical you can possibly imagine that facilitates or creates things. The very technology that you and I enjoy are spray technology based, right? The silicon that's there, all the polys and the plastic and the glass, and all of these things are being touched in some way, shape, or form by a spray, and a very technical spray. And usually behind those technical things is a very, very technical person who understands how to apply these sprays and help create the most amount of value. We've got over 150 plus thousand unique SKUs, and that's, as you could imagine, that's a pretty wide breadth of technology and offering, and all the things. We deal with things such as D-scale nozzles, and all the unique little features and parts and pieces are very important for creating the everyday products you and I enjoy. The steel in our cars, the metal castings for our engines, down to the OLED screens that you and I are looking at, and all the other fun things. So, that's a little bit about me. I spend a lot of my time more on the technical side. I spend a lot of time with customers, new technologies. We're in a very unique position that we get to see everything from bakeries to, high-level petrochemical to aerospace to you name it. There is a spray nozzle behind it.
There's an application, there's a function that's performed by something that sprays in all of these products. And, the one that really stuck in my mind from our prior conversations was, the bread, that the split top bread that you get at the grocery store. Well, that split top was generated by a spraying nozzle. And you go, well, okay, yeah, that kind of makes sense. And then why would I have ever thought about that if somebody hadn't told me? That's, such a specific thing. This content is brought to you by the TIE Sales Showdown. That's the Technical, Industrial, and Engineering Student Sales Showdown, hosted right here at Texas A&M University. We have over 200 engineering students taking sales classes every semester and a growing minor program in technical sales. These students are smart enough for STEM and savvy enough for sales, and the TIES Showdown allows them to demonstrate their selling skills in a role-play competition where industry partners, like you, serve as judges and provide them coaching feedback. If you're hiring for technical, industrial, or engineering sales roles anytime in the next couple of years, this is an event you can't miss. You can learn more at tx.ag/ties. That's tx.ag/TIES. Hope you can join us. Any can that we're consuming food out of has been sprayed on the interior. Anything that we have, anything that's painted was probably sprayed, or So this is pretty ubiquitous, and that's I think one of the interesting things about some industrial context is that you get these companies that maybe people haven't heard the names of, and yet they're everywhere. Probably this pin was in some way affected by some spraying nozzle, right? And you realize, okay, I'm touching stuff that this company has influenced. No matter
Yeah.
where I turn, no matter where I lay my hand, I'm probably touching something that's been sprayed. And of course, the big topic of this discussion and the other discussions like it is to get it. What exactly do we mean by technical sales? What does technical sales look like in your industry, in your company? And you've already gotten into a little bit of that, right? I mean, 150 SKUs, a lot of ways that you can combine things, I suppose, to reach certain results. Um, can you tell us a little bit more about that? What does the role look like? What is a technical salesperson at Spray Systems doing?
Yeah, that's a great question. And one of the best kept secrets about our company is, once you're in the company, you stay for life, because every day is different. It's not unusual for tenure to go 30, 40, even 50 years of people working in the company. That's because every single day is different. When you're dealing with 150,000 unique parts or whatever applications, each sales guy, technical sales guy, becomes an expert in his domain. We could have somebody who's really, really good and understands the nuance of, like you mentioned, bread splitting. I mean, there's so much science and excitement that goes to producing, the perfect little etch for that bread at a very, very high volume. And then if you look at the bakery, right, well, then suddenly you think of, okay, well, it's on a conveyor. So now we need to spray and clean the conveyor to make sure that there's no
Mm,
pathogens or more, any of those other things. So then there's sprays cleaning the conveyor. And then on top of that, you notice how a lot of your buns that you get, sometimes they're really shiny and they have, real nice texture. Well, guess what? That's also a spray application, and it's very important to get the drop size just right. You're spraying typically an egg wash or maybe even water or an oil. And there's a way to do that at high speed, high production. And so while, the nozzle part of it's really important, you might have things that, such as this, which is like a little pulsajet, right? So this is not something you see every day, but it's actually a really unique piece of technology that allows you to do what's called pulse width modulation. So now we're spraying. I can keep my pressure the same, but you have a valve in there that can actuate, call it 10,000 cycles a minute. And so now I can keep the spray plume pretty standard, but I can adjust my flow rate up and down, typically with a hydraulic nozzle. So we're trying to work towards getting more and more control. And that's what these processes and plants are continuously doing. Every drop matters. Every piece of energy matters that's being utilized, because the margins are getting tighter and tighter and tighter with the higher economies of scale that occur. And a company like ours, we're well positioned to be a value add. We're selling the hardware and machinery, but you can only sell that hardware and machinery if there's the intelligence behind how to use it. And that's where the
mm,
technical piece comes in. So you ask the question, every day it could be completely different. We might spend a little bit of time in the lab doing some fixturing and testing. A customer says, hey, I've got this glue that I'm trying to spray. Can you spray it? And so we go back and see what we can do and see what the best way and mix and match of technology to try it. If a
yeah.
customer was trying to do something like that, they don't have access to all the different tools and to hone in on what the exact solution is. And so that's where the technical piece really becomes a huge value in the marketplace. But yeah, every day is different. We've got folks who focus on, myself, I'm more in energy production. I spend a lot of my time on nano and micro spray, micro deposition, nanotechnology. Some folks have a lot of medical, some folks have bakeries, some have machinery. Just imagine the car industry. There are so many sprays that go not only with the paint, but you
Yeah.
have sound deadening material, you have insulations, you've got seams that need to be sealed, the coatings on glasses, and then all the plastics that go in there with adhesive sprays. So uh, you can make a whole career out of just understanding some really
That one
uncommon
vertical, yeah.
knowledge, yes, that not a lot of people, would spend their time. And even the PhDs are like, oh my gosh, because they don't study sprays and droplets. There are very few people who actually go to that level of
Yeah.
detail in the world. And then that's where, as a company, where we get to come in and, help them out.
Yeah. Provide that expertise. Well, and I can imagine, I mean, I guess, is the case in a lot of contexts. A customer, a prospective customer, could, if left to their own devices, come up with a minimally viable solution to their problem. They could find a nozzle on their own that would perhaps technically get the job done, but perhaps get it done in a way that is really inefficient and really costly and waste a lot of whatever they're spraying. And uh, this is value add 101, right? This is okay. Find people who need guidance. Maybe they could come to some sort of solution. The example I use with students trying to keep it insanely simple in an introductory sales class is like, you imagine you're working for Xerox or some company like this, and you're selling to small business owners, like really small, 5 desk, 10 desk, very few employees. Uh, it's probably not intuitive to that person why they should spend a hell of a lot more money on a big centralized machine when they could, go to Best Buy or Office Max or whatever and pick up whatever's on sale. And then, okay, then you realize, well, the ink packs are going to cost you, $50 to $100 each time you need it. And then everybody's doing something different. And, we can come up with solutions, but they're often not the best. And so, I realize also that you're talking about every day being different, and I'm wondering, this is probably very important to and evident to people that are maybe our age. And I wonder if 20 somethings in my class realize that even when you're doing something that you like, that you're interested in, when it's monotonous, it's monotonous. It sucks the energy out of it, and that sort of day-to-day variance can be something that keeps you getting up in the morning and keeps you happy in what you're working on. So if we were to pick a vertical, I mean, realizing that there's probably differences, but your technical salespeople are going into a customer and they're doing what? I mean, it must start with a pretty deep dive kind of discovery process, understanding what they're doing.
Yeah, it really depends. Each individual technical sales guy has their own approach and how they work, right? So for me, a customer will say, "Hey, I need to cool this gas into a liquid stream." And it's like, "Okay, cool." So we'll just go through, well, do you have an idea of what drop size you're looking at? And if they say based on that, we understand how technical they are. If they say, what's drop, why do I care about drop size? Well, then we get into a whole different piece on, the thermal and energy balance of what we're dealing with. If they say, oh yeah, I want this exact micron, then we get them down to a little narrow bandwidth of, okay, so you have this pressure, you have this flow. Your goal is to cool this duct in this amount of time at this amount of pipe diameters. And we just kind of work through that problem in parallel with them. Oftentimes it does end up becoming a site visit. So we'll go to the chemical plant and see really what their pain point is. There's something with feeling and being present that you can really get in tune with what's happening and really see what's at risk. For chemical and petrochem plants, it's a big deal if a gas is too hot or if it gets a thermal runaway or all these other things that can occur. And so after that, we'll educate the client if, depending on their technical capabilities, we'll say, okay, well, we can consider this size droplet. Maybe there's an arrangement with an injector that we can place here. And based on our heuristics and experience, going co-flow, counterflow, all of these other terms, we can give them guidance on. Now, a lot of times we don't know what's happening inside of these pipes. If you've ever seen a river or, a bayou or a creek trickling, that water flow, there's a lot of chaos that happens. Well, that same chaos happens inside of a pipe. So oftentimes we have software and we have a lot of PhDs behind us who understand computational fluid dynamics.
Yeah.
And they're able to trace those particles on where they're moving, how they move, and actually understanding that reaction that our sprays in different drop sizes may or may not have. And so then we can find the optimal portion and help mitigate a lot of risk, right? This is not something they can see. Typically, it's volatile chemicals, dangerous things that they're dealing with. And, the computational side allows you to kind of get it within the parameters within spec on the first go round without making a lot of experimental design changes. So that's one on a more technical gas processing side. But let's say at a bakery, they just say, hey, I need to clean my conveyor. Okay, cool. So, you ask a few questions, and most of the time our guys will say, well, do you mind if I, drop in? We're in a unique position as a company where we're not out having to prospect a lot and, go after we've been around since 1937. So the customers have our part numbers and they're like, oh, hey, I need this, or, is there something you can help us out with? So we're in a lot of different position than, let's say, a newer company that's out there that doesn't have the brand awareness or the market breadth. So it is truly more of a technical sales. And really, when you think about the amount of energy that it takes to create a spray, it's a lot. It takes a lot of energy to put that back pressure behind and move a liquid and actually atomize it. I was playing with some fun numbers just in my head. Because, I was trying to understand, a customer was saying, hey, I've got 1,000 nozzles flowing 5 gallons a minute. And, it's not a big deal if it's 20% out of spec. And I was like, okay, well, let me run through the math on what that really could mean. And another caveat is the human eye can't see a nozzle that's worn until after about 30% over capacity. So when you think about one nozzle, well, let's extrapolate that out to 1,000 nozzles.
Yeah.
And so the rough math that I did is I said, okay, let's just say, you're supposed to flow 5 gallons a minute at 40 PSI. And then I just changed it to where, let's call it just 5.01 gallons per minute, or 0.3, or something very nominal on the over
something
side.
that many people would call identical. Yeah.
Yeah, they're like, oh yeah, this is in spec. This is great. Well, when you're flowing at those scales at 1,000 nozzles at that time, 24/7. So I did water, energy, labor, maintenance, and the cost of capital. That cost comes out to about $250 a day, just being a 0.0 whatever out of spec on the GPM, which is insane. And in fact, it turns out to be about $92K if you're running 24/7 per year. So $92,000 just because we're not thinking in terms of really how do we constrain and get into control our true processes. And sprays are chaotic. And so there's always opportunity. The more significant digits you measure, typically the more variance you'll see if precision is not spot on, right? So if I go a million zeros out, I can start detecting a few more things. And that's what happens with technology. We get better and better resolution, which forces us to create better and better spray nozzles. And so why, after almost 100 years, that's why we have 150,000 of them. It's our customers challenge us to
develop the newer and the better. Yeah.
Get these processes in control.
Well, right. and so this is a great example then, because, we talk about in selling, we should be providing value. We should be working with people, partnering with people to find ways that we can create these win-win relationships. And in some cases, we have to get really abstract with that, right? Well, the value we're providing is peace of mind, right? Well, how do you quantify peace of mind? I don't know. That's a little abstract, but what you're saying is, no, dollars and cents. We can tell you, what this imprecision is costing you is this much every year. That's going to be pretty powerful.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's easy.
At that point, do you really feel like you're selling somebody or persuading somebody, or do you feel like you're, providing a required service?
Yeah. I think sales can have a negative connotation depending on, whose lens you're looking through, but you're absolutely right. I'm all about the value. If there's no value that I can discern and see, there's no point in me having a conversation or trying to sell it, right? That's not what we're about. We're about providing greater value or greater insight. And to your point, the peace of mind thing, can be very, very hard to quantify. But if you can have that higher level conversation with the customer, instead of them just, putting the finger in the air, say, yeah, let's choose this one.
Yeah.
If we can give them a little bit of guidance, say, well, maybe out of this banquet of 100 options, we can narrow it down to 5 or 10. That's pretty cool. And that can help them do a lot of different things. So, and to your point of the value side, every environment changes. So if there's a temperature rise, if the humidity's different, what you ate for dinner matters, kind of thing. And so when you get into these precision type applications, particularly in semiconductors, when the stakes are really, really high, every single piece of the physics matters. And so that's where having somebody who can really hone in on the details. I mean, they're worried about the process. They care about, can I fly these chips out at, 5,000 chips a day to meet our quota? Oh, and by the way, if this becomes a constraint, well, then we need to figure that out and make sure somebody else is the bottleneck and not us. Right. And so it's a constant process of reducing constraints. And it's always coming in these cycles. People get a different level of consciousness. They start getting new tools to analyze things. And oh my gosh, you think about the environmental controls. People are like, oh, we're dumping all the CO2 in the air. What are we? We've always been dumping the CO2. And regardless of politics, it's a waste byproduct if we're not doing something fruitful with it. Right. If I'm not creating value with that CO2 that I'm exhausting, well, guess what? That's an opportunity. That's not a political stance. That's not any of these things. It's fundamental chemistry that we can actually do something with. And I think that's the mentality and the cycle. We're heavily involved in the carbon capture side of the business. And yeah, the energy balance is really, really tight. But guess what? You can create a lot of valuable things from carbon and oxygen. And those are the things that people are getting pushed and challenged to do.
Yeah. Now, I want to come back to this question that you said you might start with, which I love, and I love what you said about it. This, what drop size do you need? Because I think probably we start our sales students where I think a lot of companies and certainly a lot of other educational programs start, which is asking discovery types of questions, kind of open-ended. Tell me what you're working on. Tell me how it's going. And those work really well in, I don't know, I'll make up a number, the majority of the time, I don't know, 70-80% of the time, those work really well. But then there are these situations where you run into and you ask some really good questions that should be impactful and get you great information. And you find out that the person doesn't have the expertise or the experience to really provide answers. You say, well, tell me how this is working for you. And you're looking around at what's happening around you and you go, okay, things are bad. I can definitely help in this situation. This person really needs my help. You say, well, tell me how this is all going. And they go, oh, things are great. Yeah. We're producing what we produce and I'm happy and my boss seems to like me and everything seems fine. You're going, okay, well, how do we break that barrier and get that conversation going that allows them to go, okay, there's some things I don't know, because that can be a painful thing to admit, right? I don't want to tell the stranger that just came in who I already know is trying to sell me something. I don't want to tell them, I don't know what I'm doing. Why don't you just, bulldoze me with whatever you say, and I don't know any better. So I love that question. What drop size do you need? And if their eyebrows raise, then okay, I'm probably going to need to bring more to the conversation than otherwise. So my question for you is, after that incredibly long preamble, my question for you is about what percentage of the time when you're talking to, and I think you're focused on the automotive sector, about what percentage of the time would you say, you ask that question and the customer responds and understands why that's an important thing to know versus kind of shrugs their shoulders and says, I don't even know why that matters.
That's interesting. And that comes down to what I've learned is when you think about the micro segmentation of your customers, the big customers who have billions of dollars and lots of employees, they're very technical and they're right there with you. The smaller companies, let's call it 100 employees or less, that awareness is definitely not there. So whenever I look at, let's say the 100 or less employees, whenever we ask those questions, we run into that a lot. And they actually do look to you more as an expert in helping them and in those things. But if they don't see the pain, there's not a lot of time and effort that really we spend there. Unless there's a huge pain point, then we come back. So I think it's a function of, does the client see and understand the value? And if they don't, then, maybe your time might be better spent with somebody who does understand and able to see that value after you've done the legwork. Now, one of the things that I've learned in approaching clients, in the 100 or less, employee, and I just say that arbitrarily, right? Because there's a big distinction from going with let's say a big Exxon Mobil like company or a big GM or a Tesla space. Those guys are a different bird, and they have the technical people that can talk at least and understand the value. When you go to the smaller companies, that's a lot different. But what's different for us is we have the lab. And so when we approach it with humility and we ask the question, instead of talking all the technical jargon and all these things, I said, hey, you know what? I see your challenge here. You believe it looks good. I'm going to go back to my lab. I'm going to shoot a video and I'm going to replicate what I'm seeing here. And then I'm going to make a few magical tweaks and shoot you a video and just see what you think. And then they're like, oh yeah, why wouldn't I have you do that? So you try to change that perspective and that mind and that realization, again, going to the significant zeros, right? Yeah. If 5.0 is good for them, okay, great. But let me show you what 5.0001119 looks like and how do we conceptualize that into our mental model. So I wasn't planning on doing this, but I'll show you a small example. Let me pull this up, and it'll take me a second. But it shows you the crudeness of the experiment. But what it also is going to demonstrate is how people communicate in stories. And one of the things that I've learned is giving people stories to tell for them to tell internally. Me saying, what drop size do you need? Well, that's okay. That's a good point. But what happens whenever I tell you a story? And then now you can conceptualize that story and tell your story internally. Now they're becoming an internal, your inside salesperson, which is really the best type of selling, I think. And why I do believe that telling stories is probably one of the biggest and most important things from the sales side, and not telling stories that are unimportant, tell relevant stories, but create stories.
Well, every day and embedding those technical details into a narrative that people can remember and as you said, retell. You list 5 important facts to somebody, they're probably not going to remember them, and that's only 5. But you can tell them a 25-minute story with some endearing characters, and they'll remember every little bit of it.
Well, that's just it. I mean, you nailed it. And so what I'm going to do here, and this is going to be so crude, but it was for an application. I just did this last week, and it takes me no time to do this now, right? When you start running these experiments. But all this is a duct, a 3-inch duct. I got a regenerative blower. I got a drop size in here. And the customer is saying, well, I've got a really wide spray angle. Do I need to be concerned about wall wetting and all these things? And instead of me giving the answer, it's just like, well, let me just rig it up and, I'll do a little bit of a show and tell. And guess what? This video gets sent to the customer, and the customer is able to explain to their manager what's happening. So what's happening is I turned on the spray, and you just see the spray plume going vertical. I'm going to cut on a regenerative blower. There's a laser seeing, oh, here's all the chaos of the droplets. And then suddenly I'm going to kick on the air and say, well, here's what happens with the motive force. And here's what happens to your spray. It gets a little bit more organized, right? And so now they say, oh, well, this is a lot more complex than what I thought. I didn't understand the velocity effects, blah, 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 blah. And this story grows legs. And suddenly, 3 weeks later, they're asking you a question, say, hey, we don't know a lot of what we don't know. And I'm like, great, we don't either. Let's do a model for it, or we'll set up a test. And that's really it's something this simple that took 5-10 minutes to rig up. But to your point of, instead of, they don't see the value, or they might not hold it in their mind, well, how can we help them tell a story to maybe change that narrative? And this is just again, just a timely, and we do
Simple
this all the
example, yeah.
time. Yeah, yeah.
No, that's fantastic. That's very cool, and sort of way to capture their attention, and sort of maybe show some due diligence on your end. Hey, we're taking
Right.
your concerns seriously. We put some stuff together to work it out on our end, and then also as a proof device, right? And I think maybe that's one of the defining characteristics of technical sales is complexity and details that really matter. And I think maybe the other one is really concretely backing up your claims, right? It's
Oh
not
yeah.
sufficient to say, "Oh, this is going to really help you. You got to do this. Let me slap you on the back. Let's get excited about this." You got to be ready to go to a lab and run some tests and really demonstrate beyond a doubt that what you're claiming is viable.
You nailed it. And also to be open to, you don't know the answer. And what I've learned is,
Mm.
the more you learn, the less you know. And I've approached things more and more and more. It's like, I could give you a parameter, but I always say the best thing to do is really to spray it and test it. Don't go off of my word or my experience. Of the best experience is actually doing it. And
Yeah.
the customers are really more open to that. And also when we do these tests, right, you might not get the sale, but guess what? If it's a smaller company, they'll be like, oh, you know what? 5 years down the road, you need to reach out to spraying systems and then suddenly that story that you told becomes a story that iterates and it just gets in the industry and now you're the expert. So it's not about the sale today. It's about how do you build up that expertise, that knowledge base, and that rapport in the industry.
Well, and that momentum that comes from that, and I love the idea that okay, if you told a good story, if you provided those individuals with a good narrative, that narrative could have been echoing around in that organization for the last 5 years without you having to
Yes.
call or email or send an insincere birthday card or all of these things that companies do. And
Right.
then they call you and they say, "Hey, we've been. Do you remember this thing that you said to me 5 years ago?" And you're probably going, maybe, maybe not. I don't know.
Yeah.
Well, it's been echoing around here. It's gotten its own life and has really kind of come to life in our organization, and we need your help now because this is part of our fabric. Uh, I actually last week, the first week of class, I got a call from. And this is just I should shut up. This isn't about me, but I got I experienced some of this momentum effect in that I got a call from a former student from when I was at Florida State who's running his own company and some of the transitions they're doing. I got a call from a former partner at Florida State. I mean, all of this stuff, people I hadn't talked to in some cases. I mean, way before COVID. Got a call from somebody who attended some training I gave in maybe 2016-ish. Just all in the span of about 48 hours. All and you're going,
That's
oh
crazy.
yeah, okay. So as much as I feel like I'm all by myself in this office sometimes, or if you're in say, okay, I'm in my car, I'm on a plane, I'm in the lab. Uh, no, these things that you've been doing can be reverberating without you even knowing it. So
Every single thing. And to your point, yeah, I think that's the biggest aspect, particularly for sales. It's a very long-term game, and every single interaction matters. Every single one. And to your point, it's one of my goals to always, at least number one, always leave people better than you found them. And if you can always do that, then eventually, to your point, yeah, you're going to get calls 6 years later from somebody out of the blue that either you directly or indirectly influenced. And that's really what, that's my payment. I don't care about the money. It's about how do we influence and make folks better and leave them way better than what we found them, whether that's people, whether that's processes and environments and everything. And I think that could be a big piece for helping the sales, reverse that term of sales being kind of a bad where,
stigma.
oh yeah, you're just a sleazy sales guy. Well, Some are. But if you're with the right company, and I think that's the biggest and most important part is if you're coming from a school like Texas A&M, don't settle.
Mm.
Don't settle for a company or don't go after oh, I get this big signing bonus and all of these other things. Well, I mean, if they're having to get after you, and throwing the money, you got to kind of decide what's the
Yeah.
motivating factor behind it.
Infer what you can. Yeah, absolutely. And I do get the sense that a lot of our students here are long-term oriented enough to know that okay, we're going to start you out a little bit higher. Well, who cares about that? What's my 5 year look like? What's my 10 year look like?
Right.
Because those answers can be wildly different across different organizations and opportunities. And was that $5,000 signing bonus, worth the massive X? That's the massive difference there at the end between you and your peers. Um, so let me ask you this: if I'm thinking about coming into a role like this, into an industry like this, is there a particular educational background or analytic competency or skill set? I mean, is there a right major? Is there a right? I need to know. I need to at least add calculus two. I need to, what are the parameters that would really set me up for success?
That's really tough. Because the beauty of sales and organizations is the diversity,
Mm,
because each customer is very diverse. Now, you do have to have a certain level of competency, right? And I think the most important thing that I look for is curiosity. If you're not curious, like, sorry, if you're not asking questions and if there's not an innate curiosity for, and genuine curiosity, I think that's number one, because if you're curious and you're inspired, you're going to learn. Um, and there are certain frameworks, and I think you and I talked a bit about this. I do look for certain mental models already. And I think mental models are so important today because I can go on ChatGPT and I can solve very complex engineering problems today. And it's not that hard to frame the question and do these things.
to
What is
outsource the
hard?
labor, yeah.
Oh, yeah. What is hard is to get somebody who can go into a field, connect with the customer, empathize with them, and also say, hey, I can bring a real value. It's going to take a long time for the robots to be able to actually do that. And I think, the core competencies from a technical side is there's a lot of value in, like I said, the curiosity, the experimental side. We've got several engineers that are very successful at technical sales. We have several business majors who are successful at technical sales. I'm a mutt of all the educational background that I've had, and it's just piecing that together. And really, that piece of paper is just the beginning. It's
Mm,
just the starting place. I will tell you, coming from certain institutions, you get a certain known expectation and value. And A&M is very, very good at, I would say, having them well prepared with the fundamentals. And I think you and I talked about, the answer is the easy part. It's knowing the questions. How
mm,
do we understand the right questions to ask? And education traditionally is going to share, unless you get into the higher level stuff, common knowledge. Common knowledge is not, common results. The
yeah.
students need to be curious for looking into uncommon knowledge and getting down to the fundamentals and the details to then be very, very valuable. I deal with folks in government and aerospace and all these things, and I can count on my hand, there's 3 or 4 people in the world who have the skill set and knowledge that some of these guys have. And when you do that, you're indispensable,
Yeah.
in a very good way. And so that's kind of the edict or the challenge, I think, is that curiosity. If ChatGPT can do it, then you need to be reading and learning and assimilating different information or creating and curating new information. AI
Yeah.
can't learn what's not published.
Yeah.
So,
Absolutely.
but that being said, a technical field, I think industrial distribution, you get that very wide breadth. I think with a sales minor, if you have the engineering background to be able to understand thermodynamics, fluids, all those things, that is important, particularly in a company like ours. But it's the person and the personnel that's really important. The personal empathy, being able to communicate well, and wouldn't it be great to just have a storytelling class? It's horrible on a transcript. It's like, oh, what's this 3 hour course of storytelling? But our whole culture, right? We were a bunch of nomads, and how did we share our
It's
knowledge? We
foundational. Yeah.
we told stories around a fire, and it seemed to work.
Yeah. Well, and I'll tell you, I know this to be the case in a lot of business school sales courses. I think probably the same can be said about what we're doing here in engineering. That we spend a lot of time, and this for good reason, I think, but we spend a lot of time talking about this discovery process and identifying the problem and all of this. And it's hard to spend the amount of time you need to spend on that during a semester to really get students comfortable with the idea of it's kind of just conversational questions, and when you hear the thing that should tickle your ear, you ask the follow up, and practicing it, and it's behavioral learning, not just kind of cognitive learning, and then to also do everything that needs to be done to get to the point where you're really really good at presenting, and I even cringe to use the word presenting because at
Yeah.
least with the students, it conjures, oh, I'm going to stand in front of a screen and read note cards verbatim. Okay, it's not about presenting. It's, maybe we need to call it storytelling. It's, hey,
Yeah.
you came with this problem. We uncovered that these were the implications of that problem. Here are the things we've tried to bring to bear to address it, and here's the one that rises to the top. And can I create a storyline with building action and a climax, and oh my gosh, that's the big reveal of the solution. And people do this. People who can do this are really successful doing this.
Right.
And yeah, so that's a good point. Maybe we'll start calling the presentation module storytelling.
I love it. Well, and you nailed it. It's so funny. You've got to be different. We can't just go, oh, yeah, transactional, all these things. If I walk into a room and I'll always carry something random, it might not even be germane to their application. But if I handed you this and you got to feel the weight of it, and I don't say a word, I just set it on the desk, guess what you do? You pick it
Pick it
up,
up.
you
Oh
look
yeah.
at it, you're doing all these things, and I won't even mention it. But whenever you get these tactile and engage the senses with people, you're competing with the TikTok brains of the world. Oh, yeah, I mean, flip, flip, flip. You've got to be novel. You got to be creative and always be switching it up. Never have I ever given the same exact presentation twice.
Mm.
Each one is different. Maybe there are some elements that I'll pull, but you've got to make it very specific to the customer. And if I can do something like what I shared pulled in the lab, and there's a young PhD or a young engineer, well, won't that make him look amazing to his bosses and peers saying, hey, I got this really complex problem. And, I told this guy to put together this thing, and here I go, I've got this little widget, and you make him look good,
Yeah.
and then he's like, well, what did it cost? Oh, it didn't cost us anything. Oh, well, you need to go spend money with the guys and learn more of what they have, and
Yeah.
it's a different perspective.
Good. Very good. Yeah, and I love this duality. I don't know if that's the right word, but that, yeah, we know the technicals, and then we're making it into a story, and we're making it into an experience. Let me ask you about the lab. So you showed us the lab video. You've referred to making videos in the lab. Is it also a lab where you bring people in and actually run things in face to face with them?
Absolutely. Yeah, that's critical. A lot of times I'll invite clients in. Number one, it's more efficient if I'm not on the road and I get them on the road, entice them enough to where they spend their time because now they're committed. Now you got to
Mm,
make sure you have something valuable to offer them, but right, it's about getting that reciprocation. So if I'm going to spend time setting something up, and it's not to say, hey, you should come to my lab. It's like, I'd like to invite you to our lab. And whenever you give an invitation versus saying an edict, there's a big difference and a big nuance for the customer. But yes, absolutely, we get them. And our lab is always in flux and moving. And said, hey, this is a qualitative experimental lab. Here's your little section that we've got demoed, and there's going to be a million other little rigs that mean
yeah.
something to us, but looks like a spider web of chaos. And but yes, absolutely. We love getting customers in and, sharing our passion of what we do.
That's great. Good. Well, I have some guests coming in for my class in a minute, and I'm guessing the voices outside tell me that they're here. Um, any closing thoughts? Anything that people get wrong about technical sales? Any big misconceptions that
Hmm.
as a final thought, you say, I want to draw a line in the sand once and for all and say, the following.
I think one of the biggest things that's so important is to humble ourselves, even though we do get technical and we can read and learn, and you get out of school and you're like, oh, yeah, this is great. I got my piece of paper, is to understand that we really don't know
Mm,
and kind of we don't know. I had a customer. They were saying, well, why can't you just tell me what the answer is? I'm trying to cool this gas and all these other things. And very smart individual, very, great guy, great relationship. And I said, look, you're asking me to tell you something that's very complex, down almost at the molecular level. I said, I don't even know what the atoms are doing around me,
mhm.
let alone what are they doing in your process. I said, there's a lot of things that have to go into it. And so just I think the humility to know that we don't know, and
and
that's
and that
really
it,
the
and that it's not
realm.
just theatrical, right? That we're not pretending to do research into this. We're not pretending to look for a solution. What we're dealing with is complex. The details matter,
Yes,
and we could assume something, and we might be right, or we might have that 0.000. Our intuition does not operate at that many decimals.
it doesn't, and each liquid is different. They behave differently. The molecular whatever bonds and all of these other things. Every liquid is different, and even if you're spraying water, right? The temperature matters. If it's 1 degree different than this degree, then yeah, everything's different. So yeah, I think it would be erasing the word "oh, I know" from your data bank, and you still have to project the authority and confidence, but also the curiosity and humility to say, you know, perhaps this is a solution, but
Let's
let's
find
find
out.
out.
Yeah. All right. Yeah, I have some suspicions. I have a hypothesis, but I don't want to sell you a hypothesis. Do you want to buy a hypothesis?
Yeah,
I wouldn't.
I'll sell you a whole bunch of hypotheses. Why
Yeah,
not?
if that's all it takes. But no, this is great, man. I think we have packed a lot into this conversation. I think there's a lot of really good stuff that we can use here, and
Awesome.
I appreciate your time.
That's it for this interview. I hope you got something valuable out of it. Of course, if you did, be sure to subscribe and rate this podcast on whatever app you use to listen. Also, share this with your colleagues and friends, and let's continue to have a deeper discussion on all things related to selling and sales leadership. See you next time in the Sales Lab.